News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users. On demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on Blip TV and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not, no retribution. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show, and I encourage you to go to our Pal Talk News Network website, which resides at reportergary.com. reportergary.com. Check it early and often, just like voting in Chicago, for stories that you may or may not see, hear, or read in the mainstream media. Of course, today, yesterday, Saturday, we were just burning up the wires there at reportergary.com as new information kept coming on the tragedy in Tucson, Arizona that happened Saturday midday. Saturday morning, midday Eastern time here on the East Coast, morning there in Tucson, where a deranged gunman shot and killed 6 people and wounded 11 others. Among the dead, a 9-year-old girl, a church pastor, the chief judge of the federal district court there in Tucson, and of course among the wounded, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who was shot in the head, a through-and-through bullet wound, and she remains in critical condition at University Medical Center there in Tucson. A lot of speculation as to the motivation of the suspect, who, as we now all know, has been ranting against the government, ranting against the currency system, who has been speaking out about how his First Amendment rights were abridged at the community college there because he so frightened his instructor in algebra that the instructor, it took 3 times to try to get him removed from the classroom. And he was complaining that his First Amendment rights were abridged because he was disruptive to the classroom and asked to leave. It took 3 times before he was successfully expelled from the class. So much so that his fellow classmates back then were expressing concerns about him coming to the class with a gun and opening fire. And yet, as obviously mentally ill as this individual was, he was able, under what some are saying are way too lax gun laws, to obtain the weapon that was used Saturday in this horrible carnage that occurred in Tucson, Arizona. Once again, reigniting the debate over gun control, reigniting the debate over the political rhetoric in this country. Giffords had been targeted both in the literal and figurative sense over her support for the Obamacare legislation, and in her hard-fought re-election campaign, her opponent both had issued published campaign literature and postings on the internet which called her a target, and they used a bullseye over her district. Now, of course, I'm sure Sarah Palin and her opponent never intended that she be literally a target, and we don't know whether her assailant was influenced by this or not. But adding fuel to that political rhetorical fire, the sheriff there in Tucson specifically saying that the political rhetoric has gotten out of hand and that Arizona has been the focal point of that rhetoric, both over Obamacare and the immigration issue. And we saw during the town hall meetings that the members of Congress held in 2009, 2009, we saw the rhetoric rise to a deafening level. We saw people demonstrating outside of both congressional town hall meetings and community forums hosted by the President of the United States with automatic weapons to express their embracement of the Second Amendment, but expressing it in a manner which frightened some people in this country, I think it's fair to say. Now, we have those such as my colleague Roger Madden who are accusing the left of capitalizing on this tragedy by raising these issues. I would like to say for the record that during the presidential debate, as you all know, those of you who have been with me here on News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News Network, and during the Obamacare debate, I have been suggesting that all sides need to tone down the rhetoric. I'm not suggesting that anybody's First Amendment rights ought to be abridged, but I think, and I have stated this prior to this tragedy, that it is important that we all of us who are in the public eye, even me with this program, we have to be cognizant on how our words might affect those who are unstable. We have seen it in the anti-abortion movement, where an abortion doctor was targeted in similar fashion, and his picture published on the internet, and his address published on the internet, with a bullseye over him, and he was gunned down. And there were threats against Congresswoman Giffords, and her district office in Tucson had been vandalized during Obamacare. I think that everybody involved in any aspect of political discourse in this nation has the right to express themselves passionately. I, for one, express myself passionately on occasion, and it would be hypocritical for me to suggest that anybody ought to be subdued or muzzled. But I do believe that all of us, especially political leaders and pundits and talk show hosts, have a responsibility to conduct ourselves, express ourselves rhetorically in a responsible manner. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that the government should take action or that new laws ought to be introduced because of these concerns, but I am in agreement, and we don't know now the motivation, and I issue that caveat as I make this statement, of the alleged attacker who is in custody. And we do know that there was some kind of a shrine to the occult that was found under a tarp in the backyard of his house. The New York Daily News went back there and made pictures of it. I mean, this is obviously a very disturbed young man. But that being said, I don't think it is inappropriate for us on this occasion, all of us, no matter what our political point of view, to suggest that the time now is right. And unfortunately, it doesn't enter the debate until something like this happens. The time now is ripe for us all of us who have bully pulpits, to start expressing ourselves in a responsible manner, cognizant of the fact that not everybody who is listening to us, whether we are politicians or opinion makers, not everybody who is listening to us is necessarily sane. And we have to be aware of how our words might affect another individual. Cassandra in the United Kingdom. Cassandra, welcome to News Talk Online on the Pal Talk News Network.
Thank you very much, Gary. And as with America, this has been the top story since the event happened. But before I begin my remarks, I'd just like to take a moment to say something about the 9-year-old girl, Christina Taylor Green, who died. An innocent bystander, born on 9/11, believe it or not, born into a violent world and left in an equally violent world. And I think, you know, I mean, my heart goes out to the parents of that child that caught up in this, and you know, I think we need to remember the other people as well as as Gabrielle Gifford and the judge, because they were public figures, doesn't demean the death of people like this young girl. What the other comment that I would have is that there has been, and here, you know, sort of operating in a forum like Power Talk and listening into rooms and taking part in discussions, there has been since you know, for the last 3 years or 4 years or so, a much more violent attack in terms of politics. It's not, you know, it's no more, well, that's your idea. Okay, you're entitled to your views. These are my views. It's been a virulent attack. And I do believe that what has happened, and certainly over the last couple of years, it has become quite toxic. You know, the accusations that fly backwards and forwards between one group and another group has created a climate that has allowed the anger to develop. And this man, a very unstable man from all accounts, from what I've heard and what I've read, would have this anger in him, because that's symptomatic of his sort of condition. And so the anger grows and grows and grows, and it bubbles over, and it boils to the point where it explodes. And this is the result of the explosion. And I think that is sad. If I was saying anything to any politicians anywhere, I would say, calm down the rhetoric, have the good, healthy political debate, but for God's sake, don't go putting targets on your website and then explaining it away by saying, you know, the target is for your vote. You know, that doesn't fly with me. That really doesn't fly with me. Because I think that it's insightful, and it's extremely dangerous when you have unstable people. Thank you, Gary.
Well, thank you, Cassandra. And I know there are those who interpret those comments as only coming from the left. I don't come from the left. I have positions that sometimes are supportive of the left, and I have positions that are sometimes supportive of the right. And I have been expressing concern about this for the longest time. Again, I add the caveat that we do not know, because he is not cooperating with the investigators, the ultimate motivation of this young man, and we don't know whether that kind of political propagandizing had any influence on him. But we do know that there are unstable people who can be motivated by that kind of rhetoric and those kinds of imageries, and it's not something that we want anybody to be tipped over the edge to do something that's stupid. And we have heard people screaming out in anguish over the rhetoric that they have been fed on a daily digest, almost a daily diet, during the height of political campaigning, whether it's for political office or whether it's over issues.